looking after the children. Christmas, it's a second half of the 19th century invention. That's a family, well, in the Middle Ages it was a community event, but it became a family instead. And now we spend all our free time doing these silly things. We can't go to the pubs, we can't go to the cycling, because we have to do this. This is the new project. Nothing of this is biographical, by the way. But we can have an even more radical interpretation of the new era, and that's where Stephen Kuhn's comes in. It's not only romanticization of the whole family, but even the very start of the new family should be romantic. You should marry a partner because you love your partner. It's a basis or a cause of marriage rather than a consequence. Okay. It's not a duty to love your husband. You have to find your partner, which is the only true partner. And that's why you marry the partner. It's very non-instrumental. So it's a radical idea. What's romantic love? Spontaneity, empathy, an erotic relationship, talking to each other, intimate conversations and activities, share experiences. So, very important, I guess this implies more equal relationships. If you are the patriarch in the family, you're not the one who will be loved. Officially, they will love you. But if your husband is 10 years older and how say it in English? He shoots at you verbally. Do this, do that, go away. This is not very egalitarian. You don't start a conversation. Oh, honey. This is romantic love implies equality. To some extent, perhaps. I know the world is not made of roses and moonlight, something like that. But it implies equality. Okay. Softer version, some people will say love was the norm, marriage love was the norm, perhaps not the reality. Might be difficult to put it in practice. Maybe comrades is good enough, not perhaps soulmates. These are the soft versions of that change. Okay. Important, I think, this is perhaps the emotional version of the Malthusian marriage pattern. Perhaps it's not an accident that in the West the love norm became so important, because in the West we already had the soft version of patriarchy, where marriage was a couple business. So maybe that's just the emotional version of that Malthusian marriage pattern. I don't know, but makes sense to me. Okay. Very difficult, of course. Stephen Kuhn can say, oh, marriage is important, we have examples here, examples there, qualitative studies there. Very interesting, convincing perhaps, but we want to measure it using quantitative evidence. Perhaps impossible, but still I think we can look at some indicators. The decline of the age of marriage as something. Love is urgent, for sure, if you're a romantic view. Love is urgent, marriage is urgent. I think I should have it. Anyway, perhaps more important is the rise of age homogamy. You marry a partner with the same age, more or less, is the best indicator. At least the best we have in our demography databases. What's the reasoning? You know age is related to experience, skills, natural authority, old, great, wise men. Resources, you can build up resources the older you are. And we know that in patriarchal systems we have typically large spousal age differences. The more patriarchy, the bigger the age difference worldwide, something like that. Okay, so I think if romantic love implies equality, we must observe increasing age homogamy. Otherwise, well, that would be extra evidence for the Kuhn's hypothesis. Not only Kuhn's has developed this hypothesis, many more scholars by way, but that's not too important for now. Let's be more pragmatic as well. We have information on age differences. It's in the demography databases. We can measure it in every country for every marriage in every period, and it's the same. It's not survey material where people have to respond to a question: did you marry for love or not? And then you have the non-response problem and the implication problems, and it's not measured in this country and there. Very complex. This is straightforward. It's comparable, and we have it for long periods of time. I admit it's a bit crude. I mean, it's not measuring this is love, but it's rather close. Okay, and what we see here is for regions in the Netherlands and Belgium, age homogamy in the 19th century, and we see a very strong increase, 25 more or less to 45 more or less in Flemish cities, and changes and increases in the other regions as well. Less strong, but the same trends everywhere. It's an urban thing, and that fits to the cultural interpretation. It's not the farmers in Helderland who will be the avant-garde of romantic love. It's very straightforward. In the Netherlands, we know also that Catholics are slower in this transition than standard Protestants. All fits together. So more in detail, age at marriage for Ghent, 19th century by class. 5 is a elite, middle class, skilled, semi-skilled, unskilled working class. We see this decline for every group. It's a general process. Strong age differences have always been there, but middle class, lower class, we rush for an early marriage. And if we see age homogamy for these different categories, we see that a strong increase for the laborers, class 1 to 3, from 30, 26 age homogamous couples to almost 50%, and the middle class from 21 to, say, almost 40%. The elite is lagging a bit behind. The middle class and the lower classes are driving the trend. For the middle class, that's not an accident. We have always believed that these cultural changes of romanticization is a middle class thing. They have the means to do it. They have a higher standard of living. You can act crazily and marry for love, something like that. It's not a farmer's thing, it's not an elite thing. The lower classes, it's a bit more difficult. Maybe here we are in the soft version. You need a comrade, perhaps not a soulmate. You can't measure this with age homogamy. But what is very important, I think, is that while same-age marriages, maximum 2 years difference by the way, it was not the dominant pattern in the early 19th century. Older husband marriages were 50, 60, 70%. And this is the new dominant pattern. Almost half of the couples consisted of age equals, age peers. That's the new world, and that's what we still want today. Good. Divorce becomes a bit more important. Very interesting. For Belgium, a rise of divorce in the second half of the 19th century. I think, if I remember well, 1830, when Belgium became independent, there were 4 couples that divorced. 1, 2, 3, 4, something like that. And some hundreds at the end of the 19th century. It's a very minimal phenomenon, but it increased. It's a bit paradoxical. If marriage is so important, hey, why does divorce then increase? Well, maybe it's just the other side of the wall. If you think marriage is important and you want to make something out of your marriage, you can be disappointed because it didn't turn out that well. So then there is a connection to if you make marriage romantic, divorce might rise. More about it in the next episode. So who are the innovators in divorce? typically that's a higher cost thing because you need money to divorce. Single life is not very easy for a worker. For a girl, for example, for men, neither way. So we see that the upper class has more divorces. There are not many divorces, but the upper class can afford it. But you have also the artists and the cultural middle class or the educated professions, and these are the typical innovators of the new age. A nuance: the lower classes, they had no formal divorce, but they just left each other and go and live with somebody else. So that was not registered as divorce, but they did it. Spousal desertion we call it. Okay, let's go to the next episode. Let's see the time. You're still happy? I have a strong work ethic. I don't give breaks. So that you can sleep a bit in between the episodes. Next episode, 1949-70, the patriarchal romantic marriage. Sounds a bit paradoxical. It is paradoxical. By the way, what I tell you today, it's more when you do research, you research in specific niches of a problem, age homogamy or something. Today I want to tell you a broader story. The last 500 years perhaps even in the future. I try to use all kinds of evidence and theories to interpret this long-run evolution. There are some black spots, there are some nuances that have to be made, which I will not make. So don't accept this as the new Bible of love and marriage over the last 200 years. I just want to give a broad overview of where we were, where we are now, and how we went from A to B. Okay. So you might disagree with something that's not very important. Well, that's good. No problem. This is the period of what we call the companion marriage. You have probably heard of this concept. This is the new norm. We had this romantic evolution. This is the new norm. Sentiment between partners, between mother and child as well, perhaps also father and child. So what is marital success here? It's something emotional. You're happy with your marriage. That was the new marriage in the 20th century, something like that. But why is it very paradoxical? This is also the breadwinner moment, where the men, the males, go to work and women stay at home. So we have romantic aspirations, but economic power distribution imbalance. We can phrase it a little bit differently. Women have lost the game of romanticization. There were some separate spheres. Late 19th century, it starts to develop. Okay, women took the private sphere and stayed there. And this now became the norm. Married women should not go to work. Some did, of course, but that was very strong. So that's why it's very paradoxical, and it doesn't feel right. Not from a normative point of view, but there is some tension in it. If romance is equality, and there is an economic power distribution which is imbalanced, there is something wrong with that. This can't last forever. Okay. Age of marriage, for some countries, we see it decreasing and decreasing up until 1960, 70. Age homogamy, the black line here, we see it increasing, and also in the 20th century. It's this romanticization process, a new marriage pattern that becomes stronger, but I think the most important evolution here is the rise of divorce. And I guess that's the answer to the paradox. The Stephanie Kuhn's already claimed divorce is the other side of the love map. Now it becomes very clear in this part of the 20th century. You start your marriage because of love, you stop it because you lack love. So the more you marry for love, the more you have divorces because there is a lack of love. Because that's the expectation. And if the expectations are not met, you divorce. And in a high standard of living society, you have the luxury to do it. Okay. So this romanticization process is a luxury evolution, perhaps. You don't have to be careful anymore, you can do crazy things like marrying for love. And then we're not happy with it and we divorce because of that. Okay, let's have a look at 20th century Sweden. Could have taken another country, but it was an interesting case study. What are the different periods, 20th century? 1950, no, 19th century, not much happens, like in Belgium, small increase. Some increase before the Second World War. With the Second World War, stronger increase, stabilization, and then massive increase in 60s, 70s. Massive. And this is contemporary situation. So this is a revolution. Okay, step by step. We're inspired by a study of Sandström on 20th century Sweden. Sandström uses the ready, willing, able, yes, approach. You know ready, willing, able? Yes, so many? Yes. Yeah, okay. If you want to have an innovation, people have to be able to do it, they have to be willing to do it, they have to be ready to do it. Ability here, it comes from fertility research. Ability here means you need to have the legal possibility. In Sweden, since 1950, you more or less had a legal possibility to divorce, which was rather real. It was not that difficult anymore. For example, there was a bilateral no-fault ground for